We're beginning the book of Shemos, the second book of Moses. We all know, we're familiar with the five Chamisha from Torah: Bereshis, Shemos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Dvarim. And Chazal, or rabbis, give us special names for each sefer. So Bereshis is Sefer HaYitzira, the book of creation, or the Sivite Sefer HaYashar, the book of the Avos, about Yesharim, ethical people. We'll come back to Shemos in a minute. Vayikra, Torah's Kohanim, the laws of the Kohanim. Bamidbar, Numbers, and Devarim, Mishnah Torah, a summary of the first four books. And what is Shemos? So we know Shemos is known as the book of Golus v'Geula, as the Ramban writes in his introduction, the book of exile and redemption. For obvious reasons, the book begins with the Golus of Mitzrayim, and then we have that for a while, and then we get to the Geula. We leave Mitzrayim, then we get to Torah at Har Sinai. So whichever you want to assume the Geula is, whether it's when we physically left Mitzrayim or when we accepted the Torah at Har Sinai, either way, that would explain up until Parshas Mishpatim. Mishpatim, also at the end of the Mishpatim, talks about Kabbalas HaTorah, Kimu v'Kiblu. So therefore, I understand up until Mishpatim, what is Parshas Truma, Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayakov, Pekudei, what are they doing? What do they have to do with Golus v'Geula? It would make more sense if we just closed up shop after we got the Torah. So the Ramban explains that no, that the Mishkan, which is the last 4 or 5 psukim with the sin of the golden calf thrown in, the Mishkan is a portable Sinai. As they say, you can't bring the mountain to you, the mountain doesn't move. So therefore, you don't want Har Sinai to be a one-time shot. You want the lessons of Har Sinai to apply all the time, as the Ramban points out. It's a special mitzvah. Allah, Hishamir, never forget about Maimah Har Sinai, never forget about the Torah was given Har Sinai. And that's what the whole end of the parshas are dealing with. It's with the Mishkan. The Mishkan is a portable Sinai. So that's the connection the Ramban says. That's why they're all appropriate in the book of Golus v'Geula, because the rest have to do with the Mishkan, but the Mishkan is very relevant. So
Har Sinai is one of the 6 zichronot that you say that the Ramban instituted, the things that you're remembering on a regular basis.
Right, the one of the Sheis, right, one of the Sheis Zechiras. We have like Amalek, other things, right. So,
and I've also heard a commentary saying that the freedom from Egypt wasn't just the fact that they had left, but it was the fact that they had the freedom to interact with God as they decided was right. So receiving the Torah was actually the point where they had received the freedom, rather than just not being the slaves anymore.
Right.
What is that? Yeah,
that's because, it's a Machlokas Rav and Shmuel, and we talk about in the Haggadah, the Leil Pesach. We know in the mitzvah, the night of Pesach, with Matchel B'Genus, V'Sayim V'Siyam V'Shvach. We begin with the shame of the Jewish people, and we conclude with the praise of the Jewish people. And there's Machlokas Rav and Shmuel, what is the shame of the Jewish people? So one opinion is Avadim Hayinu. I think it's Shmuel. Avadim Hayinu, but Pharaoh, we were slaves. And Rav says no, it's M'tchilas Ovdei Avodah Zarah. Our ancestors go back to Terach, who was idol worshippers, and that's the shame. And it's Rav and Shmuel L'shitasa, and in other areas Rav usually takes the more spiritual side, and he goes, what's the worst thing? He's talking from a spiritual point of view. And Shmuel's talking about from a physical, what's worse of a man being a slave? You don't control your own destiny. So it's Machlokas Rav and Shmuel, what is the shame? But everyone agrees you end with the praise. So the question commentators ask is, why, if the night of Pesach is all about freedom, let's get to the good stuff. Why are we going in? In fact, we do both. We take Rav and Shmuel's shame and we read about them both. Why on Pesach let's just get to the freedom. Let's just get to the good stuff. Why are we going into how bad things were? And the Maharal and others explain the power of contrast. That to fully appreciate what freedom is, you have to know what slavery is. We appreciate our freedom, but not as someone who came from a country where there was a dictatorship and other things where a person was a slave. Then that person really appreciates. Like right now, we appreciate the everyday gifts from God that we could see, we could walk, as much as we can on an intellectual basis. But clearly, someone who was blind and now they did some surgery and see, obviously the appreciation of sight for them is going to be even more, because that's an experiential. So we see the power of contrast. And in order to know what light is, you got to know what darkness is. And in fact, that's what Rav Soloveitchik explained. That's why we have two new, for those who observe them, two new contemporary holidays. Meaning we have Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, is Yom Yerushalayim. But getting back to Yom HaAtzmaut for a minute, so in Israel especially, it's much bigger. That some observe it here a little bit. The day before Yom HaZikaron. So Rav Soloveitchik said, why do you think the chief rabbis, they first instituted Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembering all the lost, not only the soldiers, but certainly soldiers and all the innocent men, women, and children who were killed protecting the land? Why do we have Yom HaZikaron before Yom HaAtzmaut? And again, the same idea is to fully appreciate that the Jewish people having the land of Israel. You have to appreciate what you gave up for it. If you think about all the tremendous sacrifice from way before 1948 and before, through our own ancestors, everyone who's given up and the blood for it. So then obviously now you can appreciate something once you know what you gave up for, what the contrast. So we see that throughout, halacha, and throughout Jewish thought is this power of contrast, and that's always about, because the power of contrast has to do with gratitude. And obviously, and in fact, something the Egyptians did not have, as we read in Pasuk Ches, Vayakam melech chadash al Mitzrayim, a new king was appointed on Mitzrayim, Asher lo yada es Yosef, who did not know Yosef. So Rashi, Vayakam melech chadash. So we have another machlokes, Rav and Shmuel. So Rashi quotes the famous dispute, Rav and Shmuel. What does it mean, a new king? So Rav Chad Amar Chodosh Mamish. One says literally, it was a new king, a new paro came about. But Chad Amar Shenischashu Gzeirasav, it was the same old anti-Semite, the same old paro, but he just strengthened and made new decrees against the Jewish people. Rashi gets it, from the Gemara in Sota later on. So, Asher lo yada, what does it mean, Asher lo yada? Asa atzmo ki lo yada. He made himself. So either way, so, whether it's a new king or not, what do you mean someone didn't know about Yosef? It wasn't possible. Without Yosef, there wouldn't be Egypt. Egypt, everyone would have been dead. In fact, that's why Chazal tell us, Chazal called two people tzadikim, where the Torah calls Noach a tzadik, in PARSHA Noach ish tzadik tamim, and Chazal in the rabbinic writings refer to Yosef HaTzadik. And we know in Jewish history we've had many tzadikim. So why only Yosef and Noach warranted the title of tzadik? What about everyone else? So there are many answers. So the interesting answer, the Das Kedim about Litosis, he points out that what do Yosef and Noach have in common? They both sustained the world. Obviously Noach came back after the flood. He went back and rebuilt the world. And Yosef, all those 7 years of famine, there would be no one left. And he didn't put away for the 7 years of plenty. So both Yosef and Noach sustained the world. How do we know that someone who sustains the world gets to call the label tzaddik? So we say it 3 times a day in davening. We're talking about God here. Poseach eshadecha umaspia l'chol chayraton. We say in Ashrei, God, you open up the hands and you sustain all living beings. Tzaddik Hashem b'chol, God, you are righteous in all your ways. So we see someone who sustains the world gets labeled a tzaddik. Hence Yosef and Noach, who sustained the world, that's why specifically them get the title tzaddik, not to exclude many other tzaddikim we have throughout the generation. So it's clear that the king of Egypt, and not just the king of Egypt, but the Egyptians as well, they asa atzmo. It's impossible not to know. They know Yosef, but they decided to not know him. In other words, forget all the gratitude. It's easier. The people, you have real ingrates who don't even appreciate at the time when you do them a favor. That's the real extreme. Those people, who are always asking for favors or doing things, and and you do them all the time, they don't even recognize even at the moment they're benefiting. Okay, so that's an extreme. Most people, at least, they thank you at the time of a favor being done. But so they point out that, however, on a higher level is, let's say, whether it's a week later, a month later, a year later, 2 years later, it's also important to recognize the good. A person could have saved your life. So the fact you saved your life. So I thank you today, tomorrow, every day. I'm not saying the person's looking around for ego. I'm not saying from the person who saved you. From your point of hakaras hatov, that should be something every possible chance to sense the gratitude. So clearly, an hakaras hatov is one of the things that the world was created for. That's the first Rashi in Bereshis. One of the first Rashi is Bereshis. The Rashi writes, "B'shviel Rashis." Because of Rashis, which is referred to Bikurim, is known as the first fruits, that the world was created for Bikurim. Why do you mean the world was created? Because Bikurim represents Hakaras HaTov. The concept of Hakaras HaTov, that's something that's integral. And if you don't have Hakaras HaTov, you consider a kafei tova, you're an ingrate. And in the Midrashim, in Jewish thought, that's one of the worst things you could be called. Someone who is a kafei tova, an ingrate, it's like you're an apikoros. It's like you're someone who is in denial. Obviously, you're not necessarily denying God. I mean, you probably are. If you're an ingrate, you don't appreciate everything that God gave you either, so you probably are. But as well as the individuals. And in fact, that's why the Avid Drum points out that we know we have a concept in davening that we know you don't have to go to shul to daven. It's definitely praiseworthy and highly recommended. If you want your prayers to be answered, as the Talmud tells us, you have a much better chance. There's no guarantees either direction. It's not that God won't answer your prayers if you're home, but you have a much greater chance to be answered among the tzibur. So one of the things we do when we're davening with tzibur is we have chazaras hashat. We repeat the Shemona Esrei. And really the halacha is, as the Gemara tells us at the end of Rosh Hashanah, for the Eino Baki. Like, let's say I don't feel like davening this morning, or again, when we say davening, we mean all davening, but in Gemara and in halacha, davening is referring to Shemona Esrei. So let's say I don't feel like davening this morning. You know what? I'm in shul. Let me reap the benefits. Let me just listen to the chazan. I'll listen to every word, and that's it. So the halacha is, it depends. If you're an Eino Baki, if you're not capable of davening on your own, then that's what it's there for. But if one knows how to daven, then you're not going to rely on you have to daven yourself. So one of the things that when we repeat the chazaras hashat, the chazan, when it comes to one part of davening, we don't rely on a messenger, we do it ourselves. Which part of chazaras hashat is done together by the congregation?
Modim.
Correct. Modim anachnu lach. When it comes to saying thank you, or when it comes to showing gratitude, you can't send anyone else. You got to do it yourself. By the whole davening, we can send them, but when it comes to modim, you got to do yourself. You can't send someone else to thank someone else. And in fact, that's what the PARSHA point out. What's the whole essence of a Jew, of a Yid? Yehuda, we come from Yehudi, from the word Hodah, acknowledge. Really, it's interesting, and Rav Hutner points out in many places in the Pachad Yitzchak that the words Hodah, thank you, and the words acknowledge have the same root. And they go, in order to say thank you, you have to have akara, you have to acknowledge. First have to acknowledge someone did something for me, and then I say thank you. So for a yid, that's the basis of the creation, and that's the definition of a Jew, to have akara satov. And we find this, we find this throughout. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu, that when God will read next week, we'll get to this week, we'll talk about different things, but one of the things is when we get to the plagues, so Moshe didn't want to be involved on the plague turning the Nile River into blood, and also he didn't want to get into the other ones with Kenan, with the earth. And why? Rashi tells us, Chazal tell us, because Moshe had a karas hatov. And Moshe is telling us a bigger chiddush. Certainly if someone, of a human being, does you a favor or something, you have to acknowledge it. But Moshe Rabbeinu is telling me even something greater, even an inanimate object. The river, what do you mean the Nile River? Someone put me in a little basket and I floated. It wasn't no more energy on your end. You just did what you're supposed to be doing. But nevertheless, we see you still have an obligation. It's a very practical. A lot of times people do favors for people, but they don't really. They're not going out of their way. That's an easy favor. I'm driving to the same place. I'll take something not that the person should have gratitude, but it's not like I did it. I didn't do anything extra. Obviously, if I take someone 3 hours out of my way, I expect more gratitude. Whether it's right or wrong, a person, if you're doing something special, you expect more gratitude. Whether you actually spell it out or not, you get over it, it's your issue. But if you're not really putting in much effort, but it doesn't make a difference. The favor for you doesn't make any difference. If you get the ride to Thornhill, a ride to whatever, to Metro, whatever the rides are, it doesn't make a difference to you whether I'm going out of my way or not. It's the same ride you're getting. So Moshe Rabbeinu is telling me a tremendous chiddush, that even when it comes to inanimate objects, and it's not that a miracle happened, you know what? The thing floated in the water. That's what you have to do. Even things, and that's why even whoever it is, it could be a boss at work, it could be someone who's doing the job. The fact someone's doing the job, doing a job, but if you benefit from that, there's an element of hakaras hatov anyway. So what? It's a job. So what? They're getting paid for it. But did they do you a favor? Yes. So you should show some hakaras hatov. But same thing with the earth. With the earth that saved him, that he covered the mitzri with. So he didn't want to be involved. That saved his life. He didn't want to go ahead and bring the kinam, the lice, to come out. That's going to be a makkah on the adama. So Moshe Rabbeinu even took it to the next step of inanimate objects. That's something we do every Friday night. We learn from Moshe Rabbeinu. In general, we want to emulate Moshe Rabbeinu, who tried to put himself in a situation where he could do as many mitzvahs as possible. Well, because he never went there, even though he was mitzvah, he couldn't fulfill the mitzvahs, but he didn't have to. He wasn't in Eretz Yisrael. But we see that one should always have the attitude of Moshe Rabbeinu, that put yourself in a situation where you can do as many mitzvahs as possible. And that's what we do all the time. We wear a four-cornered garment. We don't have to wear tzitzit. If we're wearing a four-cornered garment, then we're obligated. So we go out of our way to put on a four-cornered garment so we can fulfill the mitzvah tzitzit. That's the attitude we learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's why, and that's the hakaras hatov even on inanimate objects. And interesting, they say one of the Gedolim, I think it was Rav Henkin, back in the day in Europe, or maybe even back in the day here in America, or in Canada, North America, before now, mail's a lot different, email, etc. So they point out that they used to pay, let's say, 25 words. Let's say you paid $1, I'm making up the price, and you got a certain amount of words you're allowed to put on.
Okay.
So someone came to Rav Henkin and said, I'm stuck, I have 26 words, so I got to get rid of either please or thank you. What should I get rid of? So Rav Hagen said, it's always important to speak nicely, speak in derech eretz, and please is always a nice way to speak. But thank you, that's a biblical obligation of hakaras hatov. That's gratitude. Saying thank you, therefore, make sure you say, leave out the please and say the thank you. I know what you're thinking, thank you is 2 words, not one, but in Yiddish, thank you, gedanks or something, is only 1 word, so therefore, that's the point, is, even when, and that's what they point out, that's what is a common expression in North, let's say someone does you a favor, so the person says, who got done the favor says, thank you, and the one who did the favor says, don't mention it. What does that mean, thank you, don't mention it? Don't think by saying thank you, like we're even now, you still owe me big time. That's what subconsciously, I'm not saying every individual, but that's what, that's the saying, thank you, don't mention it is, don't think we're even now because you said thank you and after what I did for you. But either way, and that's what Rav Hagen explains, thank you hakaras hatov doesn't mean what he calls the American hakaras. Saying thank you isn't enough, meaning that's the first step. You have to actually mean the thank you. You have to actually feel the thank you, not just, because saying thank you by itself is better than not saying anything. But we live in a words are cheap. You have to actually have the feeling, and that's what the commentators point out. Hakaras hatov, of course, we know there are 2 categories of commandments between man and God, and man and man, like the 2 tablets on the Aseres HaDibros. The first 5 between man and God, the last 5 man and man. So clearly, hakaras hatov definitely involves a ben adam l'chaveiro. However, the commentators point out that that's not the yisod, that's not the foundation of hakaras hatov. Hakaras hatov is in a 3rd category. The Vilna Gaon gives us a 3rd category, not just him but many others. A 3rd category of ben adam li'atzmo. A person, your own potential, how much you could grow. In fact, that's what they point out. We know the rule is, Judaism is a religion of life. And we desecrate Shabbos, better to desecrate 1 Shabbos to fulfill many more. However, for 3 cardinal sins, we have a commandment to give up our life. If someone puts a gun to it and says, murder someone else, commit adultery, worship idols, so we have a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. At first glance, that's difficult because I understand the 610. It's better to machala 1 Shabbos than keep any more. Isn't it better? So let me worship idols once. Big deal, I'll do it once and I'll go back to worshiping you. So apparently we see better to die a life of Kiddush Hashem than have the sin of these on your neshama. What do they represent? So they each represent the end of a line of a certain category. So we know there's a category of adam l'chaveiro, being nice to people. If you have to go to the opposite extreme, murder. There's no bringing them back. When you murder someone, you've already broke the line of adam l'chaveiro, and that sin on your neshama is so great. And similarly, we have ben adam li'atzmo, ben adam l'makom. You have many mitzvahs, davening, karbanos. But worshiping another God, that's the ultimate. You've gone to the other extreme, ben adam l'makom. And there's a 3rd category, ben adam li'atzmo. Like, arayis. Like, today we live in a society of, there's no real, the morals aren't the same as Judaism. And, and let's say people have, under the impression, if it's 2 consenting adults and everything's fine. Whether it's illicit relations among men, whether it's men and women, or, whoever it is, whether it's people or wives swapping, what everyone agrees to, or whatever the case may be. So what you hear people saying is, let's say someone committed adultery. How could you do that to your spouse? In other words, I'm not denying that point, but the focus is only on the b'yadam l'chaveiro. Like, in other words, if the spouse is okay with it, so it wouldn't be so bad. It's basically they're focusing on the b'yadam l'chaveiro aspect. Yep. But in Judaism, in addition to that, there's something more fundamental. It's the b'yadam li'atzma. Who are you hurting? You're hurting yourself. You're killing yourself. And that's what those 3 things are. They represent the end of the line of each category. So hakaras hatov, of course, it's an element of an adam l'chaveiro, but ultimately it's really about adam liatzmo. What is hakaras hatov? When I say thank you to you, it's not for you. I mean, obviously it is for you. You're incidental to it. It's for me. I have to develop in myself a midah that I have gratitude. I appreciate what God does for me. I woke up this morning. That all the people that helped me throughout the day, all the people who have helped me yesterday, last year, the people who are going to help me. But Adam Liyatzmo fundamentally is something that is within, that I have to acquire. And that's why you find different midrashim that, seem to have put tremendous priority on hakaras hatov. And that's why, because you're developing a midah in yourself, and that's why many times that's why we have a halacha of giving tzedakah. However, and there's a general rule on a ben adam l'chaveiro, on an interpersonal. Usually, it only applies to Jewish people, and the reason is because it's a reciprocal obligation. I'm obligated to help you because you're obligated to help me. A non-Jew isn't obligated. Not that I'm not going to help him, he's not going to help me, but it's a reciprocal obligation. So all Ben Adam Chaveiros, from a strictly legal point of view, I'm not saying, of course, you help even people who aren't Jews. From a strict legal point of view, applies to. However, the Rambam. So there's a whole discussion by tzedakah. Whether we're giving tzedakah to non-Jews. So that's the whole. So the Rambam. So the Gemara in Gin talks about Darkei Shalom, that of course you have to give charity to non-Jews as well. And the Midrabban, rabbinically speaking, let's say you have a Jew and a non-Jew in front of you, and you're going to give the Jew and not the non-Jew, you're going to cause Ava, you're going to cause hatred. Mm-hmm. And sometimes even if he's not in front of you, so we assume, Midrabbanan, as long as he's not an idol worshiper or whatever, different things, but Midrabbanan, rabbinically speaking, you have an obligation to give charity. But the Rambam sheet is, and others point out in there, that he's only talking about Midrabbanan in terms of the mitzvah tzedakah. But else the mitzvah halachta midrachav, else the mitzvah of emulating God, that you have a chiyuv daraisa to give. You have a biblical mitzvah to give tzedakah to a non-Jew. From the aspect of me developing myself to become godlike, is do I become a better person by not giving someone who's not Jewish? Or, I don't know. Well, the way maybe I could speak Lashon Hara, it's a guy. Even I'm not getting into the halach, if it's even true or not. But if it was, does that mean do you become a better person speaking Lashon Hara because the person is obviously not? The point being is, besides there's an element of Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, but here's the focus is Ben Adam Liatzmo. The halach, that's the difference between tzedakah and chesed. Tzedakah is result oriented. If I drop $20 out of my pocket and Ani picks it up, I get a mitzvah. I don't even know I did anything. Obviously, I'm not a different person. I'll get rewarded in heaven, but I can't say I'm a better person now. I didn't even know I did it. But the other aspect of Gemilas Chasadim, that qualitatively speaking, that comes from me. I have a desire to do a good deed, and I'm going ahead. Like the Gemara says in the beginning of Shabbos, it's the opposite. In this, in this world, it looks like the rich person is doing more for the poor person, and I'm not taking away. It's a tremendous mitzvah of tzedakah, and you are helping the ani out. But as the Gemara tells us, the one giving tzedakah is really benefiting the most. The impact it's going to have on you is eternal, and the impact on you giving tzedakah. Obviously, the person got a couple of meals, that was great, but your impact of doing a good deed, helping someone else, that's eternal, and that's what it's all about. Hakaras hatov is the Ben Adam Liatzmo, and that's what the pasuk's telling us here. That's something, and that's why that probably led to and it's interesting. This is the beginning of PARSHA Shemos, and one of the first things to tell us, "Vayakam el chadash al Mitzrayim ashaloya as Yosef." Already, the first the Torah is acknowledging no hakaras hatov here, and you live in a society with no hakaras hatov. Not only you insult upon injury, not only do they not recognize Yosef, but insult, they make them slaves, the people who saved the people, and then make them slaves, and torture them, kill them eventually. So once you break those bounds, there's no turning back, and that's why Kadosh Baruch Hu had eventually, if the Jews wouldn't have left Mitzrayim at that time, they would have been so sucked in by the Tumah, it might have been too late. So that's one of the many lessons that we see from PARSHA Shemos, is the Indian of Hakaras HaTov, that the Egyptians were lacking, not knowing Yosef, and the importance, as we pointed out throughout, of the different concept of Hakaras HaTov, and the whole world was created by it. Modem Anachnu Lach, Moshe, even inanimate object, we do it every Friday night. We cover the challah when we make Kiddush, because usually you make hamotzi before wine, so the motzi is the king. But not to make the bread feel bad, we cover it up. Our bread doesn't have any feelings. It's not for the bread, it's for us. That we're supposed to incorporate in us how to. That's why there are people coming back, they're fighting, the husband and wife are fighting. Oh, I can't believe you didn't cover the challah, or this isn't ready. They're missing the whole point of it. To cover the challah and then fight with one another, it's the whole hakaras. You're missing not to embarrass someone else. Yeah. The lesson is not to embarrass the challah, which has no feelings. Certainly, don't embarrass people who have feelings, and that's that's what we see, and that's what Mefarshim are getting at, perhaps. Asher vayakam melech chadash al Mitzrayim. At least that's what I'm saying. We're getting at. Asher lo yas Yosef. This lack of hakaras hatov was basically the beginning of the end of Mitzrayim, and that's probably true of most people. People are lacking hakaras hatov. It's usually the beginning of the end. Not that you can't change yourself and do it, but if you don't change it, it's usually those are the people who are usually very bitter and angry. The people who don't appreciate anything, they're always complaining, and there's a more, and that's another discussion. There's a moral obligation to be happy, and those who don't have gratitude cannot be happy. And usually, no one likes being around miserable people. But that's a whole separate discussion. It's all about a lack of hakaras hatov.